Well, intense fighting is continuing on Ukraine's eastern front as defense forces look to thwart Russian efforts to seize full control of Sievierodonetsk. Elsewhere, Russia has stepped up airstrikes in and around Kharkiv. Authorities say 3 children were injured, but Ukrainian troops have made steady progress in the largely Russian-controlled region of Kherson to the south. Local authorities claim that forces have advanced along the Dnieper River, destroying key Russian military stores. Well, let's now bring in Samuel Romani. He's Associate Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. Mr. Romani, thanks for joining us on Euronews tonight. Now, the battle for Sievierodonetsk looks to be coming to an end. But where do you see Russia now pivoting when the city does perhaps finally fall?
Well, first of all, it's not a guarantee that Sievierodonetsk is going to fall extremely quickly. It's obvious that they've gotten control over 70 to 80% of the city, according to Ukrainian estimates, but Ukraine still controls the key industrial zone, and there's still a long battle in the Azov chemical facility, which is going to be a smaller scale version of the saga that we saw at the Azovstal steelworks in Mariupol. So Sievierodonetsk is not gone, but the next step is going to most likely to be Lysychansk, which will lead to the fall of Luhansk, and then crossovers in Donetsk, Odessa, where they launched 14 missile strikes around today, and of course Kharkiv.
Now, you mentioned the word saga there. The NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, he's warned, of course, that the war in Ukraine could last years. Is that your take then?
Well, my take is that it's going to last a very long time because even the Ukrainians are admitting that Russia's got the financial capabilities and the military wherewithal to carry out this war for another 1 to 2 years. A lot of the predictions that began in late March that Russia was running out of the kind of missiles and munitions that it would need to sustain the war in the long term haven't seemed to have panned out. Equally, the Ukrainians are not going to concede any scenario of which they lose substantial amounts of territory, like Luhansk and Kherson. They're going to try to recapture those territories with a counteroffensive in July or August with new Western weaponry. So the Ukrainians will be launching a counteroffensive, the Russians will be continuing their expansionism, and the result is a war that could definitely last years.
So can you see Russia sitting down for any sort of peace talks or negotiations?
Not at this moment in time. I think it would probably take them being concerned about a tangible Ukrainian counteroffensive to come back to the table. Because right now, the Russians are feeling ascendant. They feel as if they've gotten the upper hand in Luhansk, and then they can cross the Sievierodonetsk River, go into Donetsk, and then take over all of Donbass, and then complete the liberation of Donbass, which is what Dmitry Peskov and other Russian officials have said was the core goal of the operation. So right now, the Russians are almost smug and confident about their position, so they probably aren't willing to engage in talks. But if the Ukrainians manage to gain a meaningful counteroffensive, get the kind of weaponry, artillery, even fighter jets down the line that they need, and the Russians start stalling in Kharkiv or Odessa, or if there's a hidden twist in Sievierodonetsk, which delays their capture of Luhansk, then we can see maybe the Russians talking about dialogue again.
So if this potentially is such a long, protracted war, how much more long-term military, political and economic support do you think Western leaders can offer Kiev?
Well, the main thing is that the Western leaders stay the course. I mean, Boris Johnson had an important point when he was warning of Ukraine fatigue, because that is possibly setting in as the Ukraine crisis is linked to rising food prices, linked to rising fuel prices. There's questions even amongst 30% of Americans in a recent Fox News survey about why are we giving money to Ukraine when we could be using that money to develop our own country. It's a midterm election coming up later this year in the States, a presidential election after that. So the main thing is that Western leaders keep their resolve and resist those kind of populist inclinations that might take them away from supporting Ukraine. But I think the movement in general still seems to be towards more howitzers, more AEPCs, more artillery, at a slower pace than Ukraine would want, but the weapons are streaming in, and that's going to be important for Ukraine as it tries to recapture lost territory and keep Russia from annexing Kharkiv and Odessa.
OK, Samuel Romani, we're going to leave it there, but thank you for joining us on the programme tonight. Thank you so much. Now, Germany has announced its latest steps to boost gas storage levels in preparation for the next winter season, over fears Russia could reduce or even completely halt supplies. Russian state-controlled gas exporter Gazprom has cut deliveries by more than 60% in recent days. Germany's economy ministry says new measures to store gas will mean an increased reliance on coal-fired power plants. The move marks a turnaround for the ruling coalition, which vowed to wind down its coal usage by 20 to 30%. Well, for more, let's now cross over to Kate Brady in Berlin. Kate, so with the risk of supply shortages of gas, can Germany get its levels up in time for winter?
Well, that is the big question. As you say, there's so many factors at play right now. Of course, Germany has been trying to reduce its dependency on Russian gas since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, something that critics had been calling on Germany to do for years. On top of that, as I say, the gas storage facilities here in Germany are also down to just 57% now, something that Robert Habeck, the Vice-Chancellor and German economy minister, who's said that these coal plants are going to be fired up again, he said that's just simply not going to be enough to get Germany through the winter. So, of course, Robert Habeck, the Vice-Chancellor, being a Green politician as well, this is a particularly hard measure for him to swallow, the fact that Germany is planning on firing up more coal plants again to really, fill that gap that's been left by these gas shortages. But there are some other measures on the table as well. There's talks of a gas auction that would be aimed at huge industry. So we'd see big industry here being financially recompensated if they indeed reduce their gas consumption. And of course, consumers will be directly affected as well. There's even talk of a cap on domestic heating. So it really seems that nothing is off the table right now. And the German government is certainly scrambling to do everything it can to make sure that Germany can see itself through the winter now with these reduced gas supplies.